The year was 1776, and the air was thick with the promise of revolution. The colonies, tired of the British yoke, were on the cusp of something unprecedented, a bid for independence. In the bustling streets of Philadelphia, where cobblestone paths wound through rows of brick houses, whispers of rebellion grew louder each day. John Adams walked briskly through the city, his mind racing with the enormity of the task ahead. The Continental Congress had convened, and the debates within the State House were fierce. The Declaration of Independence was still a draft, a fragile parchment that held the dreams of 13 colonies. Adams knew that if they failed, the repercussions would be catastrophic. But if they succeeded, it would mean a new nation, a new beginning. Inside the State House, the atmosphere was charged. Delegates from the colonies argued passionately, their voices echoing off the wooden walls. Thomas Jefferson sat quietly, his quill scratching against the parchment as he refined the words that would soon be immortalized. His usually calm demeanor masked the anxiety within. He knew that every word mattered, that history would judge them by this document. As the hours turned into days, tension among the delegates rose. Benjamin Franklin, with his sharp wit and wisdom, played the role of mediator, easing tempers and fostering compromise. His presence was a reminder of the stakes. They were not just fighting for themselves, but for generations yet unborn. Outside the State House, the city thrummed with anticipation. Taverns buzzed with talk of independence, and markets were filled with speculation. Ordinary citizens, from blacksmiths to merchants, felt the weight of the moment. They understood that their lives were intertwined with the decisions being made within those hallowed walls. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city, Adams met with Jefferson and Franklin in a small candlelit room. The draft of the Declaration lay between them. Adams spoke first, his voice steady but urgent. "We cannot afford to waver now. This declaration must be bold, unequivocal. It must speak to the hearts and minds of our people." Jefferson nodded, his eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. "I've written the preamble, but we must be united in our message. We are not just declaring independence from Britain. We are declaring the birth of a new nation founded on principles of liberty and equality." Franklin leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. "Indeed, but we must also be pragmatic. We need the support of all 13 colonies. Every word must be chosen with care to ensure that our cause is just and our intentions clear." The room fell silent as they read through the draft once more. Each sentence was scrutinized, debated, and revised. The weight of history pressed down upon them, but they were resolute. They knew that this document would either ignite a revolution or condemn them as traitors. Finally, after countless revisions, the Declaration was ready. It was a bold proclamation, a defiant statement of their right to self-governance. The words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal," resonated deeply, a clarion call for freedom. On July 4th, 1776, the Continental Congress convened to cast their votes. The tension was palpable as each delegate stood to declare their colony's position. As the final vote was cast, a collective breath was held. The motion passed, and the Declaration of Independence was adopted. The news spread like wildfire through the colonies. Bells rang out in celebration, and the streets filled with jubilant crowds. In Philadelphia, the Liberty Bell pealed its sound, a symbol of the new nation's birth. But as the celebrations continued, Adams, Jefferson, and Franklin knew that their work was far from over. The real struggle was just beginning. The British would not relinquish their hold easily, and the fight for independence would require sacrifice, perseverance, and unity. Thus began the journey of the United States, a nation forged in the crucible of revolution. As the 13 colonies rallied together, they would face immense challenges, but their resolve was unshakable. The ideals enshrined in the Declaration of Independence would guide them, a beacon of hope and liberty in the face of adversity. The story of America had begun, and it would be a tale of courage, struggle, and triumph, a testament to the enduring spirit of a people determined to carve their destiny. It was late, and the narrow streets of Philadelphia were eerily quiet. John Adams, weary from the day's debates, found himself wandering past the dimly lit houses. His mind, however, was far from at ease. Doubts gnawed at him. Could they truly defy the might of the British Empire? The flicker of a lantern in a nearby window caught his eye, drawing him from his reverie. Inside, a shadow moved. Curious, Adams approached and saw Samuel Adams, his cousin, seated at a cluttered desk, poring over maps and letters. John tapped lightly on the window, and Samuel looked up, a weary smile crossing his face. He motioned for John to enter. "Burning the midnight oil, cousin?" John asked as he stepped inside. Samuel nodded. "There's much to be done. The British won't take our declaration lightly." John took a seat across from Samuel, glancing at the scattered papers. "Do you ever wonder if we're doing the right thing?" Samuel's eyes met his, filled with a determined fire. "Every day, but freedom is never easily won. We fight not just for ourselves, but for future generations." John sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, it's just—" "You're afraid," Samuel finished for him. "We all are. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the will to act despite it." John nodded, feeling the weight of his cousin's words. They were on a path with no return, but it was a path they had chosen willingly, knowing the sacrifices it would entail. As dawn broke, casting a pale light over the city, the two men rose, ready to face another day of struggle. The road ahead was long and fraught with peril, but they would walk it together, driven by a shared vision of liberty and justice. In a small farmhouse on the outskirts of the city, Abigail Adams tended to her children. The war was a constant shadow over their lives, but Abigail remained a pillar of strength for her family. Her letters to John were filled with encouragement, her words a balm for his weary soul. One evening, as she sat by the fire, young John Quincy approached her, his brow furrowed with concern. "Mother, will father come home soon?" he asked. Abigail pulled him close, smoothing his hair. "Your father is doing important work, my dear. He's helping to build a new country, one where you can grow up free." John Quincy looked up at her, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Will it be a good country?" Abigail smiled, her heart swelling with pride and hope. "Yes, my son. It will be a country where every person has the chance to be free and happy." As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the Adams family, like so many others, endured the hardships of war with resilience and faith. They knew that their sacrifices were for a greater cause, one that would shape the future of the nation. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, King George III was not oblivious to the rebellion brewing in the colonies. In the opulent halls of Buckingham Palace, he paced back and forth, his mind a whirlwind of anger and confusion. His advisors watched him anxiously, aware of the storm that was about to break. "These colonists are ungrateful," he muttered, his voice tinged with frustration. "We have given them protection, prosperity, and this is how they repay us?" Lord North, his prime minister, stepped forward cautiously. "Your Majesty, the situation is delicate. We must tread carefully." The king stopped, turning to face his advisor. "Carefully? They have declared independence. This is treason. They must be brought to heel." Lord North nodded, his expression grave. "We are preparing our forces, Your Majesty, but the colonies are vast and the terrain is difficult. It will not be an easy campaign." King George's eyes hardened. "Then we must crush them swiftly and decisively. Show them the might of the British Empire." As plans were laid for a military response, the king's resolve was clear. He would not let the colonies slip from his grasp without a fight, setting the stage for a conflict that would change the course of history. Back in the colonies, the first skirmishes of the war unfolded. The battles of Lexington and Concord, the siege of Boston, each conflict a step closer to the uncertain future they were all hurtling towards. General George Washington, appointed commander-in-chief of the Continental Army, rode through the ranks of his soldiers, his presence a calming force amid the chaos. He understood the enormity of the task ahead, but his steely resolve inspired those under his command. One night, as he sat by the campfire, Washington penned a letter to his wife, Martha. His words were careful, filled with both affection and the weight of responsibility. "My dearest Patsy," he wrote, "the days are long and fraught with danger, but I hold your love close to my heart. It gives me strength to face each challenge. Know that I fight for a future where we can live in peace and liberty." Martha, back at their Mount Vernon estate, read his letters with a mixture of pride and fear. She managed their affairs, her strength a quiet testament to the sacrifices made by those left behind. Their bond, tested by the distance and the dangers of war, remained unbroken, a beacon of hope in a time of darkness. As the war raged on, the colonies found unity in their shared struggle. Small villages became fortresses of resistance, and citizens of every class took up arms. The wealthy and the impoverished alike found themselves side by side in the fight for freedom. In the southern colonies, plantations that had once thrived on the backs of enslaved people now became battlegrounds, and the enslaved, driven by whispers of liberty, saw in the chaos a glimmer of hope for their own emancipation. In one such plantation in Virginia, a young man named Peter, born into slavery, watched the unfolding war with keen eyes. He had always been a quick learner, secretly taught to read by the plantation owner's wife, who had seen the spark of intelligence in him. As the conflict drew closer to their land, Peter's thoughts turned to freedom, not just for the colonies but for himself. One night, Peter overheard a conversation between the plantation owner and a British officer who had come seeking provisions and support. The officer spoke of the British strategy to offer freedom to any enslaved person who would fight for the crown. "Join us," the officer said, "and you will be free men under British protection." Peter's heart raced. He knew the risks, but the promise of freedom was a powerful lure. The next day, he slipped away from the plantation, determined to join the British forces and claim the liberty that had always been denied to him. In New York, where the British had established a stronghold, the Continental Army faced its toughest battles. The city, with its bustling ports and diverse population, was a microcosm of the tensions that gripped the entire nation. Soldiers clashed in the streets, and loyalists and patriots lived side by side, often in a state of uneasy truce. Alexander Hamilton, a young and ambitious aide-de-camp to General Washington, worked tirelessly to rally support and strategize the next moves. His eloquence and fierce intelligence made him a key player in the fight for independence. Yet despite his public confidence, Hamilton harbored private fears about the future. Late one night, as he penned yet another letter to the Continental Congress, Hamilton confided in his closest friend, John Laurens. "Sometimes I wonder, John, if we are truly prepared for what lies ahead," Hamilton admitted. his voice low and filled with doubt. "We are fighting not just a war, but for an idea, a republic where men are free and equal. Can we truly achieve it?" Lawrence, ever the idealist, clasped Hamilton's shoulder. "We must believe we can. It's that belief that will carry us through, that will inspire others to join our cause. Without it, we are lost." Hamilton nodded, drawing strength from Lawrence's unwavering faith. Together, they returned to their work, driven by the shared vision of a free and just nation. The winter at Valley Forge tested the resolve of the Continental Army like never before. Encamped in the frigid Pennsylvania wilderness, soldiers faced starvation, disease, and the relentless cold. Morale was at its lowest, and desertions were common. Yet it was here, in the bleakest of conditions, that the bonds of brotherhood were forged stronger than ever. George Washington, sharing in the hardships of his men, walked among the rows of makeshift huts, offering words of encouragement. His presence was a balm for the weary soldiers, a reminder that they were not forgotten. One evening, as Washington sat in his tent contemplating the dire situation, Baron von Steuben, a Prussian military officer who had volunteered to train the Continental Army, entered. "General, I believe I can help," von Steuben said, his accent thick but his resolve clear. "These men need discipline, training. We will turn this army into a force that can stand against the British." Washington's eyes lit up with a glimmer of hope. "If anyone can do it, Baron, it's you. Our men are willing, but they need guidance. Let us begin at once." Under von Steuben's rigorous training regimen, the ragtag group of soldiers transformed into a disciplined fighting force. Drills, routines, and the establishment of a standard for military conduct gave the men a renewed sense of purpose and pride. As spring approached, the Continental Army emerged from Valley Forge not defeated, but reborn, ready to take the fight to the British once more. Meanwhile, in the halls of power, the political landscape was just as treacherous as the battlefield. The Continental Congress, tasked with governing the fledgling nation, was a hotbed of intrigue, alliances, and rivalries. Amidst the debates and disagreements, one man stood out for his quiet resolve and unyielding dedication: James Madison. Madison, with his keen mind and meticulous nature, worked tirelessly to lay the foundations of a government that would truly serve the people. His vision of a republic, balanced and just, was a guiding light in the tumultuous times. One day, as Madison reviewed the latest correspondence from the front lines, he was approached by Patrick Henry, a firebrand known for his impassioned speeches. "James, the people are restless. They demand more say in their governance," Henry declared, his voice brimming with urgency. Madison looked up, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Henry's fervor. "Patrick, I understand their concerns, but we must proceed carefully. A government hastily constructed is a government destined to fail. We need a constitution that protects the rights of all citizens, not just the majority." Henry frowned, but there was respect in his eyes. "You're right, of course, but we must never lose sight of why we're here. The people are the true rulers of this nation." Madison nodded, appreciating Henry's passion. "And that is why we fight, to ensure that the people's voices are heard and their rights protected. We are building something greater than ourselves, something that will endure." As the war drew on, stories of heroism and sacrifice became the fabric of the American Revolution. Women like Abigail Adams and Martha Washington played crucial roles, managing estates, raising children, and providing support to the cause in countless ways. Their strength and resilience were the silent pillars upon which the new nation was built. One such woman, Sybil Ludington, a young girl from New York, made her mark on history with a daring midnight ride. When her father's militia needed to be rallied to fend off a British attack, Sybil rode through the night, covering 40 miles to alert the soldiers. Her courage and determination inspired all who heard her story, a testament to the unbreakable spirit of the American people. In the South, the war took on a brutal guerrilla nature. Francis Marion, known as the Swamp Fox, led daring raids against British forces, using the swamps and forests of South Carolina to his advantage. His unconventional tactics frustrated the British and bolstered the resolve of the colonial forces. Marion's camp, deep in the heart of the swamp, was a haven for those who sought to fight for freedom. One evening, as the men gathered around a campfire, Marion spoke to them, his voice steady and filled with conviction. "Men, we fight not just for ourselves, but for the future of this land. Our tactics may be unorthodox, but they are effective. We know these swamps better than any enemy. Use that knowledge. Strike swiftly and fade away. We are the ghosts that will haunt the British until they leave our shores." The men nodded, their eyes shining with determination. They knew the dangers they faced, but they also knew that their fight was just. As the war neared its end, the siege of Yorktown became the decisive moment. American and French forces, united in their cause, laid siege to the British army led by General Cornwallis. The sound of cannon fire echoed across the fields, and the smoke of battle filled the air. Inside the British encampment, Cornwallis knew that the situation was dire. His troops were exhausted, supplies were dwindling, and reinforcements were nowhere in sight. In a moment of despair, he penned a letter to his superiors detailing the hopelessness of their position. "To His Majesty's government," he wrote, "the situation is untenable. We are surrounded on all sides by a determined enemy. Surrender seems our only option." The next day, Cornwallis formally surrendered to Washington, marking the end of major hostilities in the war. The victory at Yorktown was a turning point, signaling the beginning of the end for British rule in America. The aftermath of the war was a time of reflection and rebuilding. The Treaty of Paris, signed on September 3, 1783, officially recognized the United States as an independent nation. The new country faced immense challenges, but the spirit of its people was unyielding. John Adams, now a key figure in the new government, walked the streets of Philadelphia once more. The city, now the capital of a free nation, bustled with activity and hope. As he looked around, he saw the faces of people determined to build a better future. He met with Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin again, this time not as revolutionaries, but as statesmen tasked with guiding the new nation. "Look at what we've accomplished," Adams said, his voice filled with awe. "We have created a nation from nothing." Jefferson smiled, a rare moment of contentment on his usually stoic face. "The real work begins now, John. We must ensure that the ideals we fought for are enshrined in our laws and institutions." Franklin, ever the pragmatist, nodded. "Indeed. Let us not rest on our laurels. The future is in our hands, and we must shape it with wisdom and care." The three men, once revolutionaries, now stood at the dawn of a new era. The story of the United States was just beginning, a tale of hope, courage, and the enduring human spirit. The ideals of liberty and justice would guide them, a beacon for all who sought a better life. As the sun set over the city, casting long shadows on the cobblestone streets, the founders of the nation looked forward with a mixture of pride and resolve. Their journey had been long and arduous, but it was far from over. The new nation, born of revolution and sacrifice, would continue to grow and evolve, a testament to the power of dreams and the indomitable will of its people.